Now, a new study of Hispanic representation in Hollywood has a familiar and disappointing conclusion for Latinos. In a survey of 1,300 films from 2007 to 2019, researchers found Hispanics were marginalized, both on screen and behind the camera.
Diversity has been a long battle in Hollywood, and as tides change, the faces, skin color, and accents you see on the screen are beginning to look more like real life. But for some reason, the Latin community is still many steps behind.
Hi.
It feels like unless you are part of the community and are increasingly involved and often searching for Latin projects to support, it is almost impossible for someone to be aware of the Latin participation of the community in Hollywood. The Latin community often feels separated from it all, and they tirelessly speak up, but they are still somewhat unheard. Although it seems like this year, the desire for Latin representation has been more attainable than ever before. An example would be the Steven Spielberg project coming up, the reboot of the acclaimed musical West Side Story, as having Spielberg be part of the project turns the film into a future and anticipated success, making this film a significant step forwards and inclusion for the Latin community.
Somehow there seemed to be constantly room for a new man, right? Like, this industry loves a hot new white star in all variations, in front of the camera, behind the camera, next to the camera, in the camera, all of it, right?
But that does not undermine the fact that the statistics for Latin representation are wildly inconsistent. When it comes to film and TV, representation is still off. The numbers are inconsistent, and there was a hiatus in accumulated data because COVID-19 played an enormous role in the halt the industry suffered in 2020. But the statistics on Hollywood Diversity Report show that in 2019, Latin talent made up only 5.3% of individuals that were broadcast on TV. Television seems to be a more welcoming space for the Latin community, as the film industry has different and lower numbers regarding representation. Latin actors are often victims of oversight, as only 4.6% of movie roles in 2019 were given to actors of Latin descent. It is quite saddening to realize that the percentage of Latin people on screen has only increased by 0.3% in the last 7 years. Considering the Latin Hispanic population is the second most growing population in the country, 0.3% does not match the increasing number in reality. The Latin community now makes up 18.5% of the US population. When it comes to the writer's room, the situation hardens, as the people are not as aware of representation that lacks behind the cameras because it cannot really be seen. Representation behind the cameras is as crucial as it is in front of them, because the space for stereotypes and cultural unawareness is broader, as no one can speak for others' cultures. In 2019, only 8% of writers from the Writers Guild of America were of Latin descent, a low percentage considering the percentage of the Latin population in the country. Although the numbers are still on the lower side, representation in the writer's room has gotten better in the past 5 years, not only for the Latin community, but for people of color in general. Those statistics are only supported inside the writer's room for television, because when it comes to the film industry, the screenwriters of Latin descent only constitute 4.7% in the industry.
There's room for all of us, and we all have very different experiences and voices, and we're not a monolith, right? And so your story is just as important as the next one, and you have to believe that first, right? You have to be loud, you have to take up space, like you belong here.
If you thought the numbers were low for the latter, let me tell you how statistics show that it is harder for Latin directors because the numbers are pretty disappointing in the analyzed data. According to a USC report, Latin directors only constituted 3.6% of the industry. It was noted that when a project included a director of Latin descent, the decision aided to incorporate the Latin community in the project and inspired the production to have more talent of the same descent, as many Latino characters on screen when having a Latin director would increase from 4% to 13%. When it comes to position of power, people of color are often non-existent.
The audience doesn't see themselves reflected on screen, and you're seeing an entire class of actors not be able to live what it is that they were probably put on this planet to do.
There's been an increase in supposed transparency in companies around the country. Companies were obliged to share their percentage of people of color in positions of power, such as CEOs, managers, etc., to let people know that the morality behind each company. Many businesses failed to comply with the regular norm, especially those that owned a significant amount of brands. After becoming aware of the lack of people of color behind positions of power in other industries, it was easy to find that the number of people of color that carried an executive role in important studios is meager.
We are powerless. We are powerless. We are powerless.
As in the TV industry, only 20 were Latino executives out of 919, while none were on the CEO level. And of the 170 film executives that were part of the analysis taken, 0 were Latino.
If I spent a lot of time thinking about how people saw me, I would not be on this stage right now, right?
The executives are responsible for greenlighting projects, and they are in charge of what is seen and what is not seen out there in the mainstream media. And if representation is lacking from its roots, then the seed will never grow. Representation needs to happen from all aspects of the industry, or we will be stuck in the same cycle. When representation seems to have skyrocketed, and when waters begin to settle down, suddenly all is forgotten, and we are back to believing that the only film worth making is one with the white lead. The Latin community remains adamant in speaking up against misrepresentation and the lack of characters for its community. Last year, 270 Latin TV, film writers, and creators sent an open letter to Hollywood in the Los Angeles Times, communicating their discontent with the situation in hopes of a change. Hopefully, the people in power decide to really open their ears and set up a moment to listen to what the community is asking. The Latin community can ultimately become a real, flesh and skin kind of person in Hollywood, instead of a one-dimensional sidekick that's there to support its white lead.
Hey, how's your girl, man?
She left me.
Oh.
Yeah, my mom died too. And my dad got deported. But I got the van.
It's nice.